Trump says bring back the funny farms because we can't have people with serious mental illness just walking around. Is he right? Should we be reopening the state insane asylums? 617-266-6868, 617-266-6868. This is Sandy Shack in for Jeff Kuhner. And yes, I told you Jeff would be back today. And he wanted me to relay to everybody his most sincere apologies and wanted me to tell you what was going on. And that is that Jeff's bus accident that he had in Croatia was worse than we thought. And he's getting great medical care, absolutely top-notch medical care. But it looks like he fractured a number of ribs in the accident. And in order to keep him quiet so he can heal, they've medicated the hell out of him. So he is not in any condition to be before a microphone. He is at home under the loving administrations of Dr. Grace and his family, and he is fast on his way to recovery. But he wanted me to give you his apologies and say if he could be in front of the microphone, he would be, but it would not be to anybody's benefit to have an extremely medicated Jeff Kuhner on the air. So he will be, fingers crossed, and it looks like he's healing very quickly. He will be back with us next Monday. So you have me for the rest of the week. And I know I am a poor substitution for Jeff Kuhner, but I will do my best for you. And thank you to everybody who has sent in their kind wishes for his fast recovery. I can't tell you how much he appreciates that. He really and truly does. He's very touched. And thank you to everybody. And I'm pretty sure it's the last time he's going to be on a bus in Croatia. So he'll be back on Monday. But until then, let's talk about what's going on here. And I want to get back to the funny farms. President Trump was speaking to Regan Reese, who's a reporter for the Daily Caller. And they were doing an interview regarding the success of the crackdown on crime in Washington, D.C., which led to a question about whether he would be open to the government reopening insane asylums to institutionalize mentally ill individuals. So there's no audio of this. It was a print interview. And so, but there is a transcript of what he said. And this is the transcript. When he was asked about reopening the insane asylums, he said, yep, I would. Well, they used to have them, and you never saw people like we had, they used to have them. And what happened is states like New York and California that had them, New York had a lot of them. They released them all into society because they couldn't afford it. It's massively expensive, but they were all over New York. I remember when I was growing up, Creedmoor. They had a place, Creedmoor. They had a lot of them, Bellevue, and they were closed by a certain governor. And I remember when they did, it was a long time ago, and I said they didn't release these people, and they did. They released them into society, and that's what you have. It's rough. It's a rough situation. And the reporter pressed President Trump on how soon he might look into this option, and his response was, is that a big thing? Are people thinking about it? And the reporter said, yes. And he said, because you can't have these people walking around. And the reporter asked, what do you do with them? And he said, well, they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. And they can live to be, 85 years old. So President Trump made these comments after he made good on another campaign promise last month. And that's when he signed the Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets executive order, which aimed to restore public order to cities and remove homeless individuals from the streets by enforcing specific rules, like no urban camping, no urban squatting, no loitering. There's a bunch of rules like that. And according to the White House report, the number of individuals living on the streets in the U.S. on a single night during the last year of the Biden administration was over 250,000, the highest ever recorded. And according to the White House, the overwhelming majority of those individuals were addicted to drugs and had a mental health condition, or possibly both of those situations were occurring. So this idea of opening the insane asylums is really part and parcel of his broader approach to combating crime. And you can't argue with his success so far. D.C. is now close to being a crime-free zone, and that statement is according to D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who said a big thumbs up to what's been happening in D.C. Cut number 9, please, Mike.
We greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city. The most significant thing that we are highlighting today is the area of crime that was most troubling for us in 2023. Now, we have driven it down over the last years, but for carjackings, the difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C. We know that when carjackings go down, when the use of gun goes down, when homicide or robbery go down, neighborhoods feel safer and are safer. So this surge has been important to us.
So it has worked out really well for D.C. And Mayor Bowser went even further yesterday when she issued an executive order directing the Metropolitan Police Department to work and cooperate with federal law enforcement indefinitely. It was in a press release released from her office. The press release says the mayor's order continues the work of the Safe and Beautiful Emergency Operations Center in managing the district's response to the Safe and Beautiful Task Force, which was established by President Trump. And she posted on X, "Today I issued Mayor's Order 2025-090 to provide the pathway forward beyond the presidential emergency." So she's not waiting for Congress to say, sure, they can stay. She's saying, I want them to stay. So this has been a huge success. So along with the crime push, the White House has also enacted a zero tolerance homelessness plan. And this was not a new out of the blue idea from President Trump. During his presidential campaign, the last one, in 2024, he posted a short video on the campaign website specifically outlining a problem with crazy people on the street. Cut 51, please, Mike.
Our once great cities have become unlivable, unsanitary nightmares, surrendered to the homeless, the drug addicted, and the violent and dangerously deranged. We're making many suffer for the whims of a deeply unwell few, and they are unwell indeed. The homeless have no right to turn every park and sidewalk into a place for them to squat and do drugs. Americans should not have to step over piles of needles and waste as they walk down a street, a beautiful city, or at least once beautiful city, because they've changed so much over the last 10 years. Our first consideration should be the rights and safety of the hardworking, law-abiding citizens who make our society function.
So that was the platform that he ran on, making the streets, one of them, making the streets safe again, dealing with criminals and dealing with the insane, the crazy people that were wandering around ever since they closed the state insane asylums many years ago. So his plan when he was running for office included, the thing we've already seen on the executive order, the banning of the urban camping, and returning people to mental institutions where they belong. Now, according to his critics at the time, during the campaign, people like NPR, and Democrats and the left say that the law and order approach has been tried and it failed. It didn't work. That's what the naysayers were saying during President Trump's campaign. Failed. Really? Just for the hell of it, let's look back in the past couple of weeks. they were saying law and order failed. Has the National Guard failed to assist in law and order in D.C.? NPR was saying that can't work. That's not going to work. And now we have the exact example that it did work. It has worked in D.C. So much so that dyed-in-the-wool Democrat Mayor Bowser, a Trump hater, said, yes, please, can I have some more? I need you to stay. This is great. This is working out well for us. Does that give you an added push to think, well, if he was right about the crime and the National Guard helping with the crime, maybe he's right about the insane asylums as well? Does that make you more or less likely to support the reopening of the insane asylums? And I'm going to make that the poll question for today, which is sponsored by Mario's Quality Roofing, Siding, and Windows. You can take it at the Kuhner Report on X or WRKO/Kuhner. And the poll question is, should we reopen state insane asylums? What do you think? And I'm going to ask that question to you too. 617-266-6868, 617-266-6868. Sandy Shack in for Jeff Kuhner here. Sometimes that feels like my theme song, to be honest with you. They're coming to take me away. President Trump wants to reopen the state insane asylums. He says, or government insane asylums, he says part of the crime problem is we have crazy people walking around and we have to get them off the streets. Do you agree? The text number is 70470. On the text line, 603 says state hospitals, involuntary commitment, fewer homeless, less crime, safer society. God bless 47, speaking the truth. I think he may have put his finger on something. There was a huge jump in crime when they closed the state insane asylums, especially here in Massachusetts. And here's the thing. Those people went from having, and let's make no mistake, state insane asylums were not exactly, vacation resorts, but those people had a roof over their head. They were fed, they were cared for, they had medical attention, and now they're homeless. They're on the streets and none of the above. So were they better off under the state asylum system, or are they better off homeless, getting into trouble, if they're crazy, impacting people who aren't crazy in a very negative fashion? And I'm referring to possible violence, things of that nature. So should we be reopening the state asylums? Is this a reasonable, rational response to a humanitarian response to the crime issue, and a positive step for, let's face it, for the people who should be inhabiting a state asylum system? Do you agree with President Trump here? Let's go to John in Malden. John, welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Very good, Sandy. You're doing a very good job. Don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For me to back up Jeff. That's good. Yeah, they should bring them back. Maybe, there's some really serious ones I can understand. There's some that could probably be okay out in the street. Not in the street, but,
Not in a hospital situation, yeah. Yeah,
not in a hospital situation is right. Because it's uncalled for, what the Democrats did, over the years of getting rid of them.
Well, they thought the argument was at the time, John, that they were not humane places, that they were just not terrific to be in. And I understand that. I think that's true of any hospitalized situation. You have to be carefully monitored because it does lend itself to abuse if you're not careful. But with oversight, I think you can keep a handle on that. And then the other reason why they shut it down is they were expensive. The tax dollars at work. So I guess one of the questions is, President Trump is putting out there that it is worth the investment, the tax dollar investment, to keep these places open. Do you agree with that?
Why not? But you, instead of making like feeling like a hospital situation, to make it look like when you go into a group home, something that's going to be like a home style type of deal. Maybe you might relate to that more. Who knows? But I can understand the way it used to be the hospital like type of deal and whatever. Yeah, that it didn't seem right for them.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's different levels, John. I think, which is what I think you're pointing out, is that you have for the highly criminally insane and dangerous people, you need a hospital situation, a lockdown situation. But for people who might be helped with medication in a less structured environment, but still has something there, independent living situation, halfway house almost kind of situations might be more appropriate, all part of the same program. I agree with you. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and I don't think that President Trump is intimating that it is. I think he's saying we need to start reestablishing these state-sponsored systems to get the crazy people, for lack of a better word, off the street, because they hurt themselves and they hurt others. And this is one of the big steps in cleaning up our streets and making them safe again. Thank you so much for the call, John. I appreciate it very much. Let's talk to Dave in Revere. Dave, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Dave?
It's a beautiful day at the beach. The sun's rising, sun shining.
Oh, nice.
Sandy, I'll tell you, I know all about the state institutions here in Massachusetts. The thing is, and I've seen this for myself, during the days when the state institutions were open up in Waltham, they abused a lot of the patients that were mentally ill. Mm-hmm. I mean, I seen it, right in front of me. I've seen it.
Yeah.
If they do open up the institutions, they need to get professional people in there, not thugs that just want to abuse people who know that they can't really think for themselves.
Yeah.
Sandy, I see a lot of them when I'm actually going to places that I have to go to for my medicals. Mm-hmm. Some of them are really good as far as the programs they have for them. But as you're saying, we don't have enough, and they should open them up to where they can be educated somehow to perform things, even though they're slower than others. Like, for instance, people who have autism and stuff like that, mm-hmm. they consider those, handicap or medical, but they're getting some type of professional help so they can, try to think for themselves, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Well, I think there are all sorts of programs that can benefit people who have mental illness, without a doubt. But I think the first step is to identify them and have options, more options than we have now. And one of those options, according to President Trump, is an insane asylum, is to bring back the serious warded insane asylum, because the criminally insane who are on the streets are creating havoc and creating very dangerous situations for everybody, themselves included. And so part of his answer is, let's spend the money to reopen the state asylums. And I understand, you've witnessed abuse at them, and that is one of the reasons why they closed. But don't you think with a little help in regard to, like you said, hiring the right people, with oversight, that it's worth opening them again, and it's worth the tax dollars?
Would be worth the tax dollars, Sandy. I mean, as far as the criminally insane and stuff like that, that's why they have Bridgewater State Hospital. And you and I both know they don't send just mentally people there. They send the criminally insane there. And there's a lot of criminally insane people in Bridgewater as we speak. So, yeah, keep that down on the other side and keep it in the middle of the woods like they have it now. Maybe open up a few more, because we definitely don't have enough of them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I think it's worth the tax dollars to investigate. And it's not, it's not a perfect situation, I think, but I think it could be a lot better than it used to be. And I think it absolutely deserves to be investigated. Thank you so much for the call, Dave. I appreciate it. We're talking about President Trump's suggestion that we reopen state insane asylums to take care of the crazy people who are wandering around the streets. Now, naysayers who don't like this plan say it's been decades since most states defunded mental hospitals and ended the practice of putting, the crazies and the homeless crazies in there. And there are legal questions around hospitalizing people indefinitely against their will. The Supreme Court ruled on the issue, I think, like 20 years ago. They're about saying, you couldn't do it. But there's always a way around, I think, these things under public safety exceptions. And President Trump is not the first president to run on this kind of public safety message. Richard Nixon campaigned on a pledge to end street crime, but when he got into office, he was stymied by Congress a little bit. So do you support reopening the insane asylums, the state insane asylums? President Trump said that's part of his crime plan, and he thinks it's a good idea to stop the criminally insane from wandering around and hurting people as well as hurting themselves. On the text line, which is 70470, 617 says, Sandy, you're absolutely correct that the mental health facilities not only should be reopened, but more created. It really irks me when many say get rid of cops and guns and bring in social workers, like they have some magical answer to the needs of these people without a solid plan to really help them get through their addictions and homelessness. Housing has years of waiting lists, and addiction clinics only keep the drugged. Reopening state institutions provided actual care and the ability to have a real plan to work with their individual needs. An investment needs to be made to improve these institutions with the help of all other organizations cooperating with the need and goal for success before it becomes so severe as it is now. I agree with that. I don't think that the previous asylums were heaven on earth by any stretch of the imagination, but I believe we know more now on several levels. One, I think there's better methods to take care of the criminally insane than there used to be 20 years ago. I think that we also are more aware of the issues and also more aware of what happens when you let them out. Because when they closed the asylums, those people, a lot of them had nowhere to go and they were dumped on the street, and crime has gone up, violence has gone up. And I think it behooves us to make an investment with our oh so precious tax dollars and put some of that instead of maybe into illegal immigration in protecting illegal immigrants. How about reopening our state asylums, putting money into those, and better health care, as the texter says, better plans to help those people moving forward? Don't you think that would be a better use of the rainy day fund than, free cell phones for immigrants? Just a thought. Let's go back to the calls, 617-266-6868. Greg in Weymouth. Welcome to WRKO. How are you, Greg?
Good, Sandy. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. So do you think we should reopen the state asylums?
Yes, I do. And I think that you should combine them, pair them with some sort of rehab programs to take care of the ones that are hooked on drugs. My question is, they're dispersing them from the cities, and they're just going to go somewhere else. They're going to, go to the suburbs or somewhere else. So we can't just, keep pushing them along because they're just going to go somewhere else. So, yeah, we need to do something like that. And I think that, we closed down USAID, but, we know a lot of the money from USAID went to other countries. Why don't we reopen USAID and make the money go to U.S. and insane asylums and rehabs and, homes for these people to get better?
I think that's a brilliant suggestion. I think that would be a wonderful use of the money that went to USAID. And it would be very interesting to me to see, and of course, because this was President Trump's idea to open the insane asylums, that, the Democratic faction is going to be, or the Democrat faction is going to be, no, we can't do it. No, it's going to be the end of democracy, because for some reason everything is the end of democracy, or it's going to be racist. I'm not sure which one they're going to land on against this. But I think they're going to land on one or the other. I don't know how they would argue against using U.S. aid to aid the U.S. I really don't. I think that would be a brilliant use of the money and benefit everybody, benefit the people who are desperately in need of care and benefit the people who are afraid to walk the streets because they don't want to be assaulted, or have to deal with somebody who is, criminally insane. I think that's genius, Greg. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think you should suggest it to your congressman. Oh, wait, you're in Massachusetts, which means your congressman, no matter where you live, is going to be a Democrat. What do you think the responses you're going to get from your congressman if you suggest that?
I'll be lucky if I get one at all.
Well, some of them are really good at responding. It's just not the answer that you would expect. That's or that is necessarily reasonable and rational. But I understand the probabilities are that is correct. You probably will not, but you never know. You never know. Thank you so much, Greg, for the call. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Larry in Leominster. Larry, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Good morning, Sandy. Well, I threw off the call screener Mike when I said I grew up with a mentally deranged. He thought I was making a joke.
Okay.
I grew up in Belmont. Belmont now is very, prestigious, very wealthy.
My dad grew up in Belmont, too, as a matter of fact.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah.
So when in the 70s and 80s, what do we have? You had McLean Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Was more prestigious than Bellevue, but not well known.
Yeah.
Just up the street from that, over the border in Waltham, you had the Fernald School for the mentally challenged kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right up the street from there, you had the Metropolitan State Hospital for the criminally insane.
Mm-hmm.
So walking around Waverly Square, where I grew up, outside of there, you had a dozen of them just wandering around aimlessly, talking to themselves. We were used to it, but those were the most harmless ones. Most harm they did was to themselves. They would usually use the train line to end things.
Wow.
But they closed them all. Now, each one had their own set of scandals, but when you think about most quasi-government or government institutions, they're all riddled with scandals throughout history, and a lot of it is Uncle Sam was behind it. There was Uncle Sam had done what's the word I'm looking? Experiments on those kids at the Fernald School. Big scandal in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
But with proper regulation, and a good attitude, good group of people, medical staff, they should reopen them. Because think about all these shooters, all these incidents. They had, the famous line was, the FBI, they were on our radar. If we had the mental institutions we did back then, they could have been institutionalized for their own good and for the good of society. I don't think we would have had near as many of these shootings if, one, reopen them, and two, take the restrictions off that like Obama put in place where you can't report all this stuff in schools, and get to the core of the problem.
I think that is it's something that I hadn't even thought that you're thinking like 4 steps ahead, where I had not gone yet, as a matter of fact. So I think that's right. I think that we're not dealing just with the crazy people that you see on the street, which is how I was thinking about this. You're dealing with people who have deep-rooted problems. What do you do with them when your family doesn't have the wherewithal to pay for McLean? Because McLean is a hospital that's still open, a very well-respected hospital, but most of those patients are private care. And, it costs money to stay at McLean. People who don't have those kind of resources, where do you go? Who do you turn to? Right now, it's nobody. Right now, it's out on the street. It's maybe you go to an emergency room and they check you out for addiction. But if you're not addicted, you're just crazy, they turn you right back out again. Unless you try to hurt yourself or somebody else, they can hold you for a couple days, but that's about it. Unless you voluntarily commit yourself to a hospital, and they're not looking to do that because then their resources go to taking care of you. They generally just kind of turn you right back out again, unless you're threatening somebody with a knife in the emergency room. They're not going to make an effort to keep you there. So I think you bring a whole new level of why we need state asylums to be reopened, Larry. I really do. I think that's a great idea. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for the call. 617-266-6868 is the number here. What do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down to reopening the state asylum system, insane asylum system? Now, it used to be they were closed because they, as Larry pointed out and other people pointed out, they were rife with scandals. There were a lot of issues. There were abuse. But don't you think we could do it better if we reopened them now? Now we are more on guard for what could possibly happen, and maybe you create within the Health and Human Services Department, maybe there's going to be a czar who oversees the state hospitals and makes sure that they hold certain levels to be kept up. Should we be spending our tax dollars on reopening the state funny farms? This is Sandy Shack sitting in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. President Trump says reopening state insane asylums is necessary to clean the streets of the criminally insane who, quote, should not be walking around, unquote. I tend to agree with him, but people who don't like the idea say they were basically hotbeds of abuse, and we can't send people back there. To which I respond, you think it's so much better on the street, where they don't know where their meal is coming from, where they're out in the elements, where they can fall victim and prey to other criminally insane people? I'm not sure I see that an insane asylum, a state-sponsored insane asylum, is worse than that. One. And two, we don't have to go back to the system we had. We could possibly go back to, and I'm assuming that President Trump is talking about, going back to a better system. Do you think this is a good use for your tax dollars? Let's talk to Rich in Brockton. Rich, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Sandy.
So are you behind opening the insane asylums?
I'm definitely opening up mental hospitals. And I'll tell you, I've had to walk in this life, unfortunately. I've had parents that have dementia. I had kids that have mental illness. And I'll tell you something, it's the sane people. We have to get over these words, but the sane people are responsible for what's happening, not the insane people, which you really can't even say insane. They're like dementia people. Right now, we build courts, we build prisons, and we treat the symptoms, not the cause. You know, if you had a kid, let's say he's 17 years old, and all of a sudden in the middle of the day he's like drunk, and he's just out of his mind drunk doing stuff, you'd say, oh my God, you'd send him to the hospital, they'd be doing all these scans, they'd be trying to figure it out, and he'd have a disease, and it'd be a medical thing. But when it becomes a mental illness, people don't look at it that way. The sane people don't. We're not there yet. It's like alien technology. We can't comprehend. We don't understand it. We're like computers. There's hardware and software. If the software is messed up, we just say lock them up. Say, funny farm, all that. The stigma is horrible. And I'll tell you something. Most of this stuff does not show up in men until it's like 16 to 20 years old. And that's when they leave their primary care pediatric physician. They go into school, they go into the military, and what do you think happens? They get lost. They don't get doctors because they're physically healthy. You got to get this stuff when they're young in the school. We all know all the kids go to school. If they took the money that they blew on the immigration, taking care of citizens from other countries, and we said, wait a minute, let's take those hundreds of billions of dollars and put it to our parents and our kids, we wouldn't have this problem. Look at our population. You got 350 million. Times it by 2%, even 1%. That's what's being born every year. So there's literally 35,000 a year of new people being born with mental health problems that we're just discarding. So over 10 years, you got 500,000 people. But these are our kids. These are our parents. And we're just turning around and making fun of it, funny farm, crazy people, criminally insane. How are you going to get a kid? Figure about Alzheimer's. If they were walking around with Alzheimer's, now, of course, if you got Alzheimer's, you're probably in their 60s and they have money and houses, so we take that away and we...
Yeah, but there's early onset Alzheimer's as well.
Oh, there is. Matter of fact, schizophrenia used to be called that.
Oh,
so,
I did not know that.
so that we don't look at it as a real medical thing, a medical hospital. Like if you went and right now you had a kid and he was in pain and is turning over and his gut was going, you take him to the emergency room and there's no problem. He's in the emergency room. You tell your parents, you go to work, oh, my kid's in the emergency room. But what happens if it's with their brain?
Well, here's the
thing. Say,
I don't mean to, I'll give it back to you, Rich, but here's one of the things I think that's important along the lines of what you're talking about. And that is that we've discovered in the past 20 years or so, more so than we knew before, that a lot of mental illness is actually has physical cause. Some of it is psychological, obviously, but some of it is literally an imbalance that can be treated medically. And to your point, if we focus more of trying to find a cause, how many more people could be helped?
In fact, you know something. This is real experience. When you go to the courts right now, pretty high up to these judges, they will tell you we can't do anything until they commit a crime. Oh. Then we have a system for this. Yeah. Because when you're 18 years old or 19 years old, and I don't know how many people out there have kids, but still 18, 19 years old, at 18 years old, they become their own people. And if they're acting all messed up, and you bring them to a hospital, they can turn around and say, I'm fine, and they walk out. And you can do sections, a lot of little tricks about sectioning and trying to get the calm and red flags, but I'll tell you something, it doesn't work. When I went through this, and I did go through it, and it was 18 years old 1 month, I left McLean's, and they wouldn't even talk to us. As parents, they said, no, the paperwork is with that person, and they are 100% in charge of themselves. And I'm like, oh, my God, wait a minute. Now, if I went to any other place. So this is what's happening, and it's us as the sane people that are letting this happen. And then we do make fun of it. I know it's good for radio and to talk about the funny farms, but you're not going to get a young person to take care of his mental health if you think he's acting cuckoo and you start saying the insane asylums, which you don't even need asylum. Asylum is something for foreign people coming in looking for asylum. An insane asylum is an outdated 18th century thing. It's a medical thing.
Put the name aside. Put the funny farm, put the asylum aside. State mental hospitals that have lockdown units in them for the criminally insane. Are you in favor of putting tax dollars into opening and supporting those, Rich?
Patient criminally insane? I mean, no, they need help. It's like cancer. You get skin cancer, you get brain cancer.
Exactly. So you can have somebody who has schizophrenia. You can have somebody who has some kind of electrolyte imbalance, or who has some kind of lithium imbalance, or has or a psychological issue that needs help. That we're talking. There's gradations of problems. But what about the criminally insane who are literally beyond being helped and are going to harm themselves and other people? There are those too. There are the people that you're talking about that can be helped, and there are those who can't be. And so don't you need a place for both of those?
When you get to the point of criminally insane, okay, that means someone went out there and we already screwed it up. Yeah. We probably did it for 15 years, and the person went out and shot up a bunch of schools. And if you look back at every event in the news and you dig down to Google and you keep breaking it down, eventually they're going to say how much the parents tried to get the help and how they were denied. But they skip it out of all the media. Believe me, I've spent way too much time
I believe you, Rich, but that's not my question. My question to you is, and I understand what you're saying, and I completely agree with what you're saying. What I'm saying to you is, okay, so there's nothing we can do to retroactively go back and help that person. So now we need to find a place for that person to be, because on the street does not help them and does not help you or me either. So don't we need the state hospitals? I understand you don't want to call it an asylum. Fine, pick another name. Don't we need the state hospitals so that person can be someplace safe, and so that we can make sure they're safe and we're safe too?
A place like McLean's has already been there and done it. The state just screws things up, okay? You need the right doctors, the right history, the right people
you say
that have already been doing this.
So in other words...
I think yes, but not through state. I mean, the state...
Well, that's the question, though. Isn't do we get more private hospitals? The question is, do we have state hospitals? That's the question. And to that you're saying no.
The question is, how do you fund it? All right, does it have to be run by the state or federal government? Because there's going to be fraud and abuse. We know that. But if we
don't know that because it's in a different administration than it's run in the past. We know things are different now. And where do we get the funding for it? Well, there've been a couple suggestions already this morning. One of which is, take the funding that we've been using for illegal aliens and use it for the state hospital, or take the funding from USAID. I thought that was a great idea. So USAID's been closed down. So instead of sending aid abroad, let's send aid to state hospitals, and put the money into them. So, I mean, you can't assume that there's going to be abuse when it hasn't reopened yet. Was there abuse in the past? Absolutely. And so now we know where the abuse comes from, and don't we have an obligation now to put maybe a different level of oversight onto these hospitals to protect people? I think we have the ability to do that, and I think you have an administration that's interested in doing that now. And don't you think so I don't think more private hospitals, which does require funding from people you have to find, and I think there's more abuse that could happen there when you're talking about a for-profit situation than you are for a state-funded situation, don't you think?
And again, like what Trump is saying, and the DOJ type of oversight is what you need. And whether it's federal or state or private, I mean, I'm beyond that, okay? And I do understand fraud and abuse. But, yes, the point is they need help. The kids need the help. And,
without a doubt, and President Trump is saying this is one way of starting to help. He's not saying it's the only way. He's not saying stop there. He's saying this is something we need to do to protect our streets so that they're safe for people and to protect the crazy people both. So isn't this a good first step?
The crazy people, to protect our kids, okay? Because they're somebody's kids. They're not
Rich,
crazy.
I agree with you that they're somebody's kids, but I can't go back in time and help somebody who didn't get the help they needed earlier. We're talking about what exists now. And I agree with you that moving forward, we need to help the kids. But that's not the question that's on the table. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it very much. The number is 617-266-6868, 617-266-6868. When you hear a call drop off, it means a line has opened up for you. Our text number is 70470. Let's see. 508 says, Sandy, the asylums were closed before cameras were ubiquitous. Have cameras everywhere and be remotely monitored by authorities and families within HIPAA restrictions. I think that's great. I had not even thought about that. I think that's a terrific idea. Indeed, cameras are ubiquitous now, and you can put cameras in. And I think, well, that doesn't get rid of abuse. I think it certainly cuts down on it. I think that's absolutely a wonderful idea. 617 says, reopening the asylums would certainly cut down on the calls from Bill from Sudbury. Yes, well, there's that. Maybe that's why the Dems are a little bit not supportive of what's going on with the idea of the insane asylums, because how many members of their party would end up there? 617-266-6868. Let's go to Aaron in Danvers. Aaron, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Yourself, Sandy?
I'm sorry?
I said good, and yourself, Sandy?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Sorry, you were clipped at the beginning there. So what do you think, Aaron? Should we be reopening state asylums?
Yes. Danvers, of course, is famous for the Danvers State Hospital. And I've been here my whole life. And what a lot of these facilities, and there is one group of people, organization, I should say, called Elliott House, that has purchased most of these homes in and around the community and have moved a lot of these patients or residents to into them. And I should say, unfortunately, because I've had some bad instances, is the victim of having one moved in next door to me. And it's been many, many years, and I've seen lots of things happen. And in the beginning, it was just a launching pad. They're all better. They're just going to get on their feet now, and they're going to move on. Well, that has changed. It's changed a lot. We've gone from it was only going to be women in the house, then it's mixed now. They have added on to this house next door to me, and I live in a very nice area. But the house is, they put another whole floor on the place. So I think there's like 14 rooms now, which was never this way. I knew the family that lived in the house next door to me because I grew up here. And they have come and gone, and I have not seen the transition. I have seen many things. Matter of fact, it was only 2 nights ago. I was sitting in my kitchen, and one of the residents was yelling and screaming, and it went on for an hour and a half. First, I thought it was some children in pain outside, and finally I went outside and saw that it was next door. So I wondered why there's supposed to be a social worker there in the evening, too, but no one came out. I finally walked over to this person, but I kept my distance because, I'm going to be honest, she kind of scared me. Okay. And I asked her, I said, are you in pain? Is there something wrong? And I got foul mouth and told, get up. Anyway, long story short, I just turned around and went back home. And it went on for a while longer, and I just waited till the next morning, and I called one of the social workers. And she immediately said, well, why didn't you call us? Why didn't you call? I said, it's 9 o'clock at night. And I'm surprised no one else heard it because the whole neighborhood heard it. It was quiet. You could hear a pin drop outside except for her yelling. And they said they were going to address it, and I'm hoping they do. But transitioning and buying all these homes and putting them, because I understand they had no place to put these people, and they're off the street. And I agree with that. And I thought it was a good idea. This has been going on for 20, 25 years for me. This is not something that just happened. Yeah. They've been next door to me since, a long time anyway. Yeah. And I don't see it transitioning. I don't see people coming in there and leaving. They either go back. The ambulance is here almost every night. The fire department is here every night. Cruises are here every night. I can see, I'm sitting in my kitchen and I see the red flashing lights. Something else happened next door. I see a lot of them walking around. Of course, it looked like they're all in quarter pin. I mean, they're walking around in a daze. And I know they're trying the best, and I fully support that because I know that, a lot of the institutions we had weren't very good. But I do see that there could be some place that maybe we do keep them there and let them transition from there so that somebody sees that they're progressing. But when they come out to these different homes and they're buying up all these different homes in the neighborhoods to put them in, every time I see a house up for sale, I know exactly that this company, Elliott Community, is going to come in, purchase it, and move them in there. And like I said, they're trying to stay, and I'm not bad-mouthing the whole thing, but I don't think it's the best thing that's happened to us because I don't see this transition. I see people that just, they're
so you
just
think
not
these people,
in
so you think these people, Aaron, are basically getting lost between the cracks, basically, that they're too disparate, these homes everywhere, and that they don't get necessarily the attention that they deserve because they're so spread out all over the place. Is that what you're saying?
That there wouldn't be that many people. I mean, I've had them banging on my door in the middle of the night. They've walked in my backyard, which is a big, deep yard. They've come in and they, try to bum cigarettes from my brother, or and then on top of it, different things. They don't go along with the regular town as far as trash. So because they have so many, people, residents, they put a dumpster. And it's a giant dumpster at the end of my driveway. So now I have to worry about rats or anything else because who has a dumpster at the end of their driveway that abuts my driveway? There's a lot of things that people don't realize when you move them into the neighborhoods. And like I said, I've been very, very cooperative with them because I really, truly feel for them. I do. But I see a lot of things, they're losing what they initially said they were there for. And, it's kind of hard.
So I take it, Aaron, what you're saying is you agree with President Trump that we need the state asylums to reopen because the independent transition houses can't do the job all by themselves, and that it's just too much for them.
I totally agree. I was promised something totally different than what we see next door, and I see people that are they're zombies. And I'm like, these do look like because they told me they're going to be getting jobs, they're going to be moving on to society. And I thought, wow, this is great launching pad. That's not what's happening. That's not what I see anyway. And it's been many, many years that I've seen it. So when you started this conversation this morning, I said, I've never called in before, but I said, I got my 2 cents in here.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you and thank you. It takes a little bit of courage to call for the first time. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your call, and good luck to you and your neighbors. And I think you put your finger on something here, and that is that, while the independent living and the transition houses are very useful parts of plans, they're not for everybody, and they don't necessarily help everybody. And state asylums can pick up the slack on that, and so that those houses, like the one next door to you, can focus on the people that it can really help, as opposed to the people that it's just a Band-Aid for. And I think that's a very good point. Thank you so much for the call, Aaron. I appreciate it. Let's go to Robert in Maine. Robert, welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Hi, Sandy. Can you hear me okay? I'm on a speakerphone.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh, good. Okay. Listen, thanks for what you and Jeff and your very good staff do addressing problems like this. And I've got a lot of stuff to add from my experience having worked at a lot of these places. Mm-hmm. But your callers Jeff's right. You know, these are the best callers in the world. They hit all the right topics. And once again, President Trump is right again. And all that does is feed TDS. You know, it really, which incidentally would be a nice thing to study in some of these larger institutions, because I think that the roots of TDS go a lot further than just, wanting to join a liberal group and feel good about yourself because you're in a liberal group. I think they go deeper than that. But be that as it may. And Richard was right. You know, they used to call schizophrenia dementia precox, early dementia. And yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, what I want to say briefly is that, yes, I agree with President Trump. Once again, he's right. And these institutions, when they were well run, and by well run I mean, they used to have sisters or rabbis or ministers along with the medical director who was actively involved, either a nurse or a physician medical director, and they would be able to run these places. I've worked in both types. I've worked in the ones run by CEOs who have MBAs, and I've worked in some that have been run by more medically oriented people. And you know where this is going. The ones that seem to provide the best care and the least abuse were the ones run by the people with clinical knowledge. But anyway, these things can do so much more, these hospitals, than just sequester people and keep them off the streets. They're places for research. One of the first things you've got to do when you've got somebody who has a medical illness, and a lot of these psychiatric illnesses are medical, you have to make a diagnosis. And the best way to make a diagnosis is not being in an emergency department where the poor resident or staff physician and nurses are just going nuts trying to take care of things, heart attacks and everything else, and they've got this person there sometimes for weeks who's not getting a diagnosis,
I'm sorry, I want you to hang on there, Robert. Sandy Shack here for Jeff Kuhner, who is recovering nicely from a bus accident. He'll be back next Monday, God willing. Before we go back to Robert in Maine and our conversation on whether we should reopen state mental asylums as President Trump suggests, it is time for Truth or Troll, where we ask the question, is someone telling us the truth, or are they just trolling this? Take it away, Mike.
And now, America's favorite game show, where you get to decide on the Kuhner Report. This is Truth or Troll.
All right, for today's entry of Truth or Troll, it comes from President Trump in his press conference at the White House yesterday when he is asked about deploying the National Guard to Chicago.
Your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe.
It sounds to me like President Trump is talking about invading Chicago.
Yeah, so what do we think? We're going in. That's what he says. Is he just trolling, or is this a final warning to J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson to get their crap together?
This is hard. This is a hard one because with anybody else, I would say they were trolling. But I am really not sure whether the president is telling the truth or not. If I were to guess, I would say he's telling the truth. This president would be telling the truth. Anybody else would be just poking J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson. What do you think, Mike?
I think he's telling the truth, too. I mean, he sounded really sincere there.
Yeah, there's going to be a new front, and it's going to go right down the river in Chicago. So maybe the Navy's going to deploy off the Great Lakes. I don't know. It's going to be pretty interesting. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. Food for thought, and we'll probably discuss this a little bit later on this morning, whether we're indeed going to invade Chicago, because it sounds to me like we are. But back to the discussion of whether we should reopen state mental hospitals. They were closed for a reason 20 years ago, or we thought they were being closed for a reason, and that was they were rife with abuse, they were expensive, and according to the officials at the time, they weren't helping anybody. So they closed them, and everybody went back out onto the streets, and it did not really work out so well for anybody, not for the people who were let loose, and not for the people who were walking the streets of the various cities. It seems to have created a crime situation and a pretty basic humanitarian situation for people who couldn't take care of themselves. So President Trump wants to reopen them, and we were talking to Robert in Maine before the break. And Robert, I'm sorry we were interrupted.
Hi, Sandy. Can you still hear me on the speakerphone?
Yep, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, nice call for you and your talented staff member, Mike. Yes, Trump is serious about this. He uses the word going in, and right away, the people on the other side, the PDS people, say, see, he wants to go in and shoot people with military rifles, which, of course, is completely wrong. But getting back to what I was saying before, a nice new name for these places that were called, I don't know, nut houses and all the rest of it, and even state hospitals, would be state diagnostic treatment and research facilities. Because that's what would go on there. And Aaron was right. If you have 10 people living in one of these homes, one of these Elliott's Place homes, and one of them screaming all night, you've got the cart before the horse. That person needs to be identified in the system. Go to these state diagnostic centers, and then get screened out where he or she may need to stay there, and help with the research and have programs to help with not just mental illness, but weight gain, which is a big side effect of some of these psychiatric medicines, and help them with their weight gain, perhaps using one of the programs you and others have used to help keep the weight off so they'll stay on their medicines. I mean, the benefits are enormous, and you got a lot of callers, so I don't want to go on to this, but I do want to say that Trump is serious, and I think it'll happen because it's going to happen. And we can call them state or public diagnostic treatment and research centers. One final point, the medicines are getting much better. Yeah. They were based on one biological principle, dopamine, and regulating dopamine in the brain, in certain parts of the brain. And that works. It stops the voices and the paranoia. The problem is a lot of side effects. They've just developed several really new medicines, some based on immunology, some based on completely different receptor systems than dopamine. And those seem not to have as many side effects. They seem to be well tolerated. But where do you find these answers to questions? Not in private hospitals. The size of the population isn't big enough. But in the large state hospitals, you could work with these patients and have clinical trials just like you do in large cancer centers to find out what works and what doesn't work. So I've got a lot more to say, Sandy, but that's just my 2 cents. And thanks for what you guys do.
Well, thank you for the call, Robert. I appreciate it very much. And I thought you made some very good suggestions. And I think some of your observations are spot on. I think the medicines are getting better. Treatment is getting better. And something that I'm hearing over and over again that you suggested and some other callers suggested is maybe while we reopen state hospitals, we don't call them state hospitals. We don't call them asylums. We don't call them, we try to get away from the pejorative names and from the bad associations that come with the name asylum or state mental hospital. I'm not sure you can, calling them a state diagnostic and research facility rolls off the tongue, but I think it's in the right place. I think maybe we find something else to call them so that people don't have such bad connotations with them. But I think absolutely positively they need to be opened, and I think they are for many reasons, one of which is the humane reason to take care of these people and to take the burden off the smaller houses, such as Aaron was having issues with, when those facilities are dealing with people that really are not appropriately placed in those facilities because there's no other place to put them. And I think having a state-sanctioned hospital again, I think the time has come. 617-266-6868 is the number here. This is Sandy Shack, sitting in for Jeff Kuhner here on the Kuhner Report. We're talking about insane asylums, or should we be calling them something else? President Trump wants to reopen them to get the criminally insane off the streets. He said they should not be walking around. This is part of his plan to combat crime in the U.S., in the major urban cities like D.C., Chicago, New York, L.A., or wherever else there may be crime. But it's interesting. We've been talking about what we can do to make that possible. I think it's a good idea to reopen them because I think they serve a function. I think the function that they serve is, one, humanitarian. It helps take care of the criminally insane who otherwise are on the street and who are prey or victims themselves as well as abusers. And I also think that it protects the rest of us from dealing with the criminally insane on the street because who knows what they will do. But a lot of people don't like the name insane asylum or don't like the pejorative, funny farm, nut house, things like that. And there's a stigma attached. And so you want people to be able to be comfortable going to these places if they are reopened. On the text line 70470-207 suggests call them psychiatric centers. I think that's a better name than insane asylum, without a doubt. I think psychiatric center is better. And then the previous caller said, how about state diagnostic and research facility? Well, okay. I think psychiatric center is probably a little more mellifluous. But I think what's in a name? I think if you can get people to reopen them and establish care for people who are not well enough to be in the halfway houses, I think that is an important step to both protecting us and protecting them. Also on the text line, let's see, 508 says, Ken Kesey's book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which took place in the early 60s, revealed a system that was stuck in the past with such treatment as frontal lobotomies and electroshock therapy. Yeah. But we're not talking about reestablishing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We're talking about a new modernized version of the psychiatric center. We're talking about newer medicines, newer treatment, better oversight. As one former texter or our previous texter pointed out, you're in an era now where people have cameras everywhere, and I think that oversight would be a lot easier now than it was during that particular period of time. And then C781 says, Sandy, on a lighter note, to make a joke, shouldn't Democratic states be the most on board with this idea? It's a win-win for them. One, their state is safer. Two, they'll have mental institutions full of mentally ill people that they can harvest ballots from with an address and everything. I'd be playing chess, not checkers. I think that that's one way to sell it to them. So everybody wins in that particular situation. So what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea to reopen state mental asylums? Do we change the name? Do we leave the name the same? Is this a good use of your tax dollars? Selena and Methuen, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Selena?
I'm good, Sandy. Thank you very much for taking my call. How are you?
I am fine. Do you think this is a good idea that President Trump had?
I absolutely do. And as always, Trump is always right on so glad that he just loves the people and he loves helping everybody. I come from a background with a lot of mental illness people in my family, and I'm not ashamed to say that I have a mental illness too, and I have been hospitalized 4 times, and they do everything right. I don't know from years and years ago because I've read up on it. Way back in the past, it was horrible. They did treat the patients wrong, and I like to be called. I would like a hospital to be called a mental illness because that's what it is. You're chemically imbalanced, and you can't control it, and it is not your fault. Like you see. For instance, the guy in Maine, he knew he was going to do it. He was in a mental hospital, and he specifically told everybody what he was going to do, and they continued to let him out. And then look at the horrific thing that happened. So it is a good idea, and a good idea that Trump wants to do what he wants to do, and it should be controlled better because you don't want this to continue to happen, and you do want to clean up the streets because there are people that do beg for help, and it's not there.
No, that's right. It isn't there. And I think that the point that Aaron was making earlier was a good one. I don't know if you agree, Selena, and that is you have, I think these independent living places are vital, but I think they're filled to capacity, and they may have the wrong people in them because there's no other place to put those people. And I think if you had a state hospital where you could put people who really cannot function on their own, it would leave room for people who are dealing with either medication or therapy, whatever it is that is helping them, and do have the opportunity to transition out of the system with care and help. I think it makes it easier for them to be in a situation where they're not, have to deal with somebody who is criminally insane as opposed to having a mental illness. I think they're 2 completely different things. And I think I think everybody benefits. I think the people who are living in the halfway house benefits because they have more focus on them and what they need, and they're in a situation that's going to help them thrive as opposed to one that could possibly set them back. And I think that's what happens when you have people that don't belong there who are there. Am I making any sense to you, Selena?
Yes, you do. No, you're absolutely right. I just think it's a very good idea that Trump is on board. And what I love about him is a lot of people, the Democrats don't give him any credit at all, which he deserves all the credit in the world because, see, he's even thinking about this. All he does all the time is just thinks about how to make the world better. And I can't comment enough on how, like, when I first heard this topic that you were saying, I'm like, oh my goodness, look at him. He's thinking again on how to make the world better, trying to make the streets safe, trying to make everybody safe. And not only that, he's trying to help those people that are criminally insane to try and get them better. That's all he ever wants to do is just help everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of why he suggested this. I think he is trying to make everybody better. Thank you so much for joining us, Selena. I really appreciate it, and I wish you so much luck. And I hope the system doesn't fail you. It sounds like you are working very hard at your own health and well-being, and I think that's fantastic. And our thoughts and prayers are with you. Thank you so much. Let's talk to John in Newburyport. John, welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Morning, Sandy. How are you?
I'm fine. Do you agree with opening up centers? And by the way, I have on the text line a few other suggestions for names besides state asylums. We have the Centers for Healing, and we have, how about wellness centers? Do any of these... I'm sorry, go ahead.
In my opinion, whatever they call them is kind of... It really doesn't matter. The point is, as Jeff was... I am 1,000% for this. I have firsthand experience dealing with it, what past women said, with family members. what happened with me, this was my experience. Me and my older sister had my brother who passed away from mental illness.
Oh,
and
I'm
a
so
lot of
sorry.
this mental illness is accompanied with drug or alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen was me and my sister, he was living on the street and he was talking to himself, my brother, and he was the nicest guy, but he had illness and he would not go get help. So we would go to the court and they would say, we need an address to go pick him up, or he has to commit a crime. He hasn't committed a crime. So we had problems getting him into treatment to get him help.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it happened, 30 days would go by and they would kick him loose, and we would go back to the court and they say, you have to come back in another year.
Wow.
So you keep touching on it has to be different. Absolutely in that aspect, because you can't even get these people into these places because it was the psychiatrist to the court was telling us you need an address and blah, blah, blah.
So you're saying, John, we need more than just the hospitals reopen. We need legislation that enables family members or authorities to help somebody help themselves, basically.
Are in denial of their disease and their illness, and then how do you get them in there committed? And then but it is definitely a very serious problem. I drive for a living. I'm out on the road. It's very sad. They walk around all over the place, like poor woman, people talking to themselves in the driveway. And another thing that I've witnessed is when you have two people, a male and a female, that have mental illness and addiction, then they have children, and then it perpetuates into a much bigger problem. It's very unfortunate, but absolutely they need to open it. Especially Massachusetts, the way they squander our tax dollars. Absolutely, I'm 100% for this.
Well, thank you so much for the call, John. I appreciate it very much. And I think that seems to be the resounding response, is that people think that President Trump is on the right track. But I completely agree with you. More is needed than just reopening the hospitals. And I mean, we can make a list of things that need to change. One, besides open the facilities, you need to make sure there's better oversight than there has been in the past. We know that there are better treatments. And John brings up an interesting point, and that is you need legislation that that helps family members and possibly, local authorities help people who are already who can't help themselves. Because if you have a mental illness, you can't necessarily, your judgment is not sound when you're trying to assess what you might need, how desperate a situation you might be in. And I understand, everybody's freedoms and rights that guaranteed by the Constitution, but there has to be some space in there for legislation that helps people who cannot help themselves. Our text number is 70470-978 on the text line. This text machine moves really fast if you're not up on it. 978 says, Sandy, the issue here isn't any mental health or addiction treatment. The left and their NGOs believe people in the streets want to be there and choose that lifestyle, but that cannot be true for people who are completely addicted or severely mentally unstable. Just housing them is not enough. We need forced treatment. Forced treatment. I'm a little uncomfortable with that idea with forced treatment. I think there has to be something in between what we have now, which is somebody with reduced faculties left to make the decision of themselves whether they agree to treatment or whether they've committed a crime. The police can go get them if they've committed a crime. And forced treatment. I think that maybe some kind of due process system where a board of health officials maybe review a case made by a family member that somebody needs treatment. And I think you need more than one person deciding if somebody has to have treatment. I think it needs to be there has to be some kind of way to have a group of people review it, and you have to have an appeal from that. I think you need that kind of system in there so that you're not looking at an abusive system where somebody can just point their finger and require somebody to get treatment. I think that's a problem. and that is a system that would be open to abuse. So I think we need to come up with something while we're talking about what changes we can make to make this a workable system for everybody. I think that's one of the things that we have to talk about, whether you can force somebody into treatment or whether we put a system in place that aids in that. Because right now, we've spoken this morning with family members and people themselves who have issues and were unable to make the decision because they were in denial or they just didn't have the wherewithal to recognize what they were doing. And the police can't help because they haven't committed a crime. And these families are left in limbo, and somebody's left to hurt themselves or other people, and it's just a horrible situation. So there has to be a change there. And I think a legislative change that creates, some kind of review board in regard to commitment might be the answer. What do you think of that? Let's go to Linda in Medford. Linda, what do you think about some kind of due process system to decide whether somebody needs treatment or not in one of these state hospitals that President Trump wants to open?
Well, I wanted to address another issue about the homeless situation with those who need psychiatric care. Mm-hmm. Years back, when they closed the asylums, they gave the patients prescription. But when somebody starts deteriorating mentally, it's difficult for them to orchestrate getting to the pharmacy, getting the prescription, and of course having some money to pay for the prescription. Mm-hmm. And what they were doing is they were showing up at the hospital's emergency rooms. And that's not the place to treat anything that's long-term. So they might get a prescription, but in the end, they all just didn't have the wherewithal to be out on the street without somebody monitoring them. And I think it's a good idea to open up some of these facilities now because I think they should be housed above, some of the individuals that are coming here illegally. Yes. And getting housing. And, the vets that could use housing that were injured. I think it's a very complicated issue. And I think it's important to recognize that you can't say, well, this person has been with us for 30 days, they're doing well, they can be discharged, because within 2 or 3 months, they're back in the same state.
Yeah. No, that's right. Without oversight, and that's what those houses, the one like Erin was saying was next door to her, I think are for, and are terrific. It's a great idea, but I think that they are swamped. I think they cannot give the attention to their residents that they need to. And I think they have residents that are not appropriate for them because there's no other place to put them. So I think the problems that you're talking about can be handled by, of course, opening facilities that, healthcare, like walk-in healthcare facilities to help a lot of these people as opposed to having them go to the emergency room. But also these transition houses, independent living houses, I think are also an important factor. But they can't do their job right now because they're overwhelmed by people who really should be in a more structured environment like a mental hospital. Don't you think it's interesting, Linda, do you think that President Trump intended this conversation when he mentioned to the reporter, yes, I think we should open asylums? I mean, he said this when he was running for president, and he's been following through, just ticking off the boxes of his campaign promises. And this was one of them. But by just mentioning opening the insane asylums, I state insane asylums again, he has basically generated this entire conversation regarding what other things we need to do in order to help both the criminally insane who are on the street, the people who aren't criminally insane but who have been left to fend for themselves on the street, the people who are on the street who aren't insane but have to deal with both of the two above, and families that are in distress because they don't know how to get help for people who have a mental illness that could be easily treatable through medication or therapy, but who can't get the help. So look at all the levels of conversation that have come from President Trump's, 30-second recommendation during an interview. Do you think that was his intention?
Well, I think one, we need to ask him to change the term insane asylum.
Yeah.
But New York has the homeless. They're living in the subways, and it's like that throughout the country for the most part. The other thing is that they do when they get their drugs, oftentimes they're selling them to get something to eat. So again, that's another reason they don't maintain.
Yeah. So that's another reason why I think you need the centers and the transition houses. And I think they're great. I think they are absolutely, they are one of those big steps that we took in the modern age, meaning modern after, 1970, basically, to help with people, facilitate people reentering society after being in a mental hospital. But I think that the closing of the state asylums put an undue burden on them and have crushed them. And I don't think that they get a fair shake because they're overwhelmed with what they have to do. And I think that's one of the things that we need to fix. Thank you for the call, Linda. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to John in Peabody. John, welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Sandy. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. So do you agree with President Trump? Do we need to reopen the state asylums?
I do. And my wife had complained about this for years because she worked at the Dare Island facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Dukakis at the time who might have closed a lot of these facilities down. And then later on, when she was working in Boston, after she lost that job, she would see most of these patients wandering around Columbus Park.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, my God, he says, I recognize that person. She attacked some of our staff. So I think in the end game, Sandy, not to step off the subject at all,
mm-hmm.
Is that the Democrats, I think, lose a lot of their mental facility faculty is because Trump is probably one of the few governments in charge that tries to fix a lot of problems with wasted taxpayers' money, and I think the Democrats get a little agitated with that because I think sometimes in their minds it's their own little cookie jar dipping their hands in these wasted programs. And when Trump uses wasted taxpayers' money to fix these problems, it's the one thing that separates him from typical government, because government is always looking to spend taxpayers' money on profit and revenue,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to fixing problems that have been happening for years. And like it says, Trump's finding wasted money to put it where it belongs. He's not like adding to a deficit. He's basically putting, like it says, the pegs in the right hole, and I think that's what aggravates Democrats is because, like it says, they don't like seeing this man stepping up and correcting problems that they either just didn't take the time to do themselves. It's sort of just a jealous move.
Oh, it's absolutely. That's such a good word. It absolutely is a jealous move, and I think it's based in two different things, John. I think it's based in one, they can't let him win on anything or succeed at anything because that means that he's right and they're wrong. And if that's the case, then voters are going to support him and not them, and they can't allow that to happen. And two, a lot of these problems are of their making, and to admit he succeeded at something, they had to admit there was a problem in the first place, and then they have to look in the mirror, and they don't want to do that either. So I think you're absolutely right. What do you think about the state asylums system? Do we need to rename it to make it more palatable to people? Maybe call it the wellness centers or psychiatric centers? Or are you good with state mental hospital?
Well, I think maybe mental wellness center.
Oh,
I like that. Sounds.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
actually,
if that's simplified enough and not, like it says, too blunt of a of a phrase. Like I said, my wife for years had worked around people like this, and this is something she's always argued about, is losing that particular job, even though she said it was very stressful, but it's sort of her background.
Yeah.
But and she said someday it may be corrected, but if this is brought into mainstream now, maybe, like it says, maybe it might have a very big impact on crime and all these. I mean, look at the veterans, what they're also going through.
Yeah,
they're still, like it says, wandering aimlessly to find out, their futures. It took for her nephew 15 years to finally get the VA to step up and take care of his disability. But,
wow.
It's just a lot of, I guess there's a lot of wasted money in programs that just, hopefully, Trump's trying to plug them in the right places now.
It seems like he is, don't you think, John? I mean, it seems like he's just going through a list. He identified a lot of these problems when he was running for president. He said, we need to do A, B, C, D, E. And he just seems to be checking them off. And within the first year in office, he just seems to be going right through the list. And this was one of the things that he said, and I played the campaign video that he did earlier in the show in the first, actually, I think like the first or second segment of the show today. And he said this was a problem and I'm going to deal with it. And we're 8 months in and he's making the suggestion, let's reopen the state mental hospitals. Now, it's a lot more difficult than just saying, okay, let's reopen it. We know that. It's, there's a lot that goes into it. And the state has to go, since it's a state-sponsored hospital, the state has to go along with it. But there's a lot of stuff the federal government can do, like give the state, federal tax dollars that can only be used for that, as opposed to taking it and using it for, immigrant families or cell phones or programs of that nature. You can specify, and I think that's what needs to happen. And so we need the congressional delegation on board with that as well. And then I think you have all sorts of levels of thing that needs to happen. You need to have, like I said, some kind of system set up for legislation regarding helping families get another family member help, or maybe they don't have family and they need some kind of intervention, maybe by a social worker or a local official, and you need a review board that can do that. And so you're not just willy-nilly saying, you over there, you need psychiatric help, because you can't do that. That's a little bit too draconian. You need to find a way to do it. There's so many things that we need to work on in this, but I applaud President Trump for starting the conversation by simply making one suggestion, and that was to reopen the state hospitals. And I support it, too. Thank you for the call, John. I appreciate it very much. Laura in New Bedford, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Laura?
You're doing a great job filling it in.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So do you think President Trump's on the right track here?
I do. Really quick, I've seen both sides of a coin. I've battled my own mental illness since I was about 35. Mm-hmm. Married 33 years, two great adult children. I work part-time in a mental health facility. Mm-hmm. And I think every case when a patient gets discharged needs to be assessed case by case. You can't just say, oh, let's just send them to a family. Oh, the social workers, if anyone's looking for a job, this is just my opinion. Mm-hmm. Social work needs to be a career that these college kids need to look at, really. I mean, because some people, seriously.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
take a deep breath. You're doing good.
I know I'm nervous. Some people go to group homes. Mm-hmm. Some people go to programs. Some people go to like addiction programs. Some people go back to their families. And my strong point at my job, I only work at the front desk, but I do visitors, phone calls, set up medical records, blah, 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 whatever hat they want to put on me. Mm-hmm. But, and caretakers, these families are distraught when they come visit. Some of them are, they're good. They come every day or every week or whatever. But it's a tough sell to come visit. It's really tough.
I've done it, Laura. I've done it myself with a family member, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. It is very difficult, and it's for both the person who's in the hospital and for the family visiting, because you are in distress as the person visiting, because your family member is in distress, and you want them to be better. You want them to get the most out of the situation that they find themselves in, so that they can come out and be with you. And it is a situation wrought full of emotion and fear, and it is very difficult. And I think that opening the state asylums and taking some of the pressure off the lower level mental hospitals would be just like taking the pressure off of the transition houses. I think would be a great idea. I also think that training is incredibly important, and I love your suggestion of bringing this up in more college courses and maybe bringing some state universities. You can't make private universities do anything unless, of course, you give them money to do it, but maybe in the state universities, putting more of an emphasis on social work and letting people know what kind of rewarding careers are out there is certainly, I think, a big step in helping correct, a dearth of social workers that is out there now. I think that's a great idea, Laura. You must, I know it's a difficult job, but you must get a lot out of helping people at your job.
I come from a background of dementia memory care for like 30 years, and then I needed a break from it, and then I got a job myself, and this is the job I got myself, and I think I'm good at it. I've got some issues with the charts, and
yeah.
Okay, I'd only work 20 hours. I'm 63 years old, and so if they want to, I've never been written up. It'll be 2 years in November. So like I said, I've seen both sides of the coin. I take medication myself, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm transparent with some of my visitors. I'll say, listen, I take medication. It's not a big deal. And I always say, you take whatever you have, from high blood pressure to mental illness, acknowledge what you have and go with it. Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Just say, I have this. It's okay. And that's all.
I think that's reassuring to people, Laura, when you do that, because I can tell you, I mean, if I was dealing with somebody going to visit a family member and met you at the hospital at the front desk, and you were telling me about the fact that you were on medication, I would be thrilled to pieces, because you're an articulate, intelligent, lovely woman, and it's hopeful. You see somebody functioning really well on medication, and it makes you hopeful for your family members. So I think what you're doing is very kind to tell people.
The only thing I had, really quick, I know you have a million people waiting. I'm still struggling with, what do you call transgender? We have a lot of a unit that the parents come in. It's just probably the way I grew up, and my good friend's son is, and I struggle with it, because the girl who I used to work with, who went to a different job, to say he or she person, it's like, I get all crazed.
It can be confusing. It can be very confusing, especially if you knew somebody before the transition and then after the transition, and you slip up and you don't want to offend anybody, but you're not sure what is the etiquette. I mean, there are all sorts of questions with that, so I completely understand. Thank you so much for the call, Laura. I really appreciate it, and I think it gives people a lot of insight into into the world of the mental hospitals and what it's like to work there, and what a little act of kindness can do when you're there, like sharing something personal, like you yourself are on medication. I think is a wonderful thing to do. Let's go to Dave in Vermont. Dave, welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Sandy. How are you today?
I am fine. Do you think this is a good idea to reopen the state asylums?
Yes, I do, and let me explain why. Upon arrival back into the country from World War II, a couple of my uncles went to work for the Fernald School. We grew up in the area known as the Boondocks back then, up in northern Worcester County. And they went to work for the school. One of my uncles was he headed the maintenance department, and the other one was working on one of the farms. And they were all productive farms. And I've been on the farms many times to watch. I remember cutting blocks of ice out of the pond and hauling it by oxen down to the ice house and burying it in sawdust. And the people that worked on there were the residents of the Fernald farm. And so I saw these people coming back. A lot of them were returnees from World War II. And they found purpose in their life. And this worked out on both farms. The other farm was more productive. They had more vegetables, and some of these people were out running the farm stands in the fall and everything. But I seen productivity. These people found a purpose in their life.
And it helped them, you're saying.
It's necessary.
Yeah. I think productivity is necessary for everybody, no matter what level you're on. Dave, I need you to stay on the line for a bit because we're about to go into a break. This is Sandy Shack, sitting in for Jeff Kuhner here on the Kuhner Report. We're talking about the demise of the state mental hospitals, which President Trump wants to bring back. And before the break, we were speaking with Dave in Vermont, who I believe, Dave, tell me if I'm saying this correctly. So you were talking about a state-sponsored farm prior to that you used to see growing up, and you were impressed by the fact that the farm gave the people who'd been at the hospital or the school purpose, and so then the farm closed because somebody else was more was because their production was not as good as another farm. Is that the deal?
I don't think that's so much a deal as the state. It's like any government organization. There was greed involved and corruption involved and mismanagement involved.
Yeah.
And the blame went to the wrong people and everything. But from what I've seen, I mean, these people really needed help.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, the state facilities weren't really that much existent back then. And the people weren't trained back then because mental illness really wasn't that big of a problem back then.
Or I would say, Dave, it wasn't as identifiable as it is now. They didn't know what it was, I think, back then. We've learned more and more about it as we've evolved. I think there was mental illness, but it wasn't identifiable. People didn't know that that's what it was, I think, in a lot of cases. It was also more hidden. It used to be, they used to put people, mental illness was basic in regard to other illnesses was in the backyard. And I think now it's on the front porch. So I think that's one of the differences why it made it appear that it wasn't as big a problem back then. I think it was. We just didn't know that's what it was. I think that's part of it. I mean, you don't have to agree.
Back then was kind of like in the backwoods.
Yeah.
And it was
okay.
a lot of farm fields and everything, and it was a very calmer, peaceful type of life. You didn't have horns blaring all the time.
Yeah.
They were on farms, real working farms. They cut wood. Like I said, they grew crops. They had dairy. They had beef. We put up silos. I remember silos and chopping corn and drinking some of the white lightning coming off the bottom of the silos. And but I remember working with some of these people, watching the crafts that they did and everything. And it was actually a place for them to be where they really didn't seem like it. Maybe I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but they all, had a smile on their face, and they were talking happy when they would greet you. And
they were contributing. They had a place to contribute, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That, I think that goes a long way for people to feel like they have a purpose, that they can contribute to their environment is very, very important. And I think that a lot of that was lost when the asylums, the mental hospitals, state mental hospitals were closed, and people were just basically ejected. They were essentially they opened the door and said, "Here, have a good life," and kicked people out who had nowhere to go. And not only did they lose their home, but they lost, as you were saying, they lost their the means by which they could contribute. They lost the means by which they could feel that they could function on any level, because they went from not having to worry about a roof over their head and their medication and food to now worrying about survival. And that's a whole different environment. That requires that turns some people into animalistic, or brings out the animalistic tendencies. And I think it only makes somebody who has teetering on the brink worse. And I think it contributed to the level of criminal insanity rising. But thank you so much for the call, Dave. I appreciate it very much. President Trump says one of the answers to crime on the streets is, let's reopen the state mental facilities that were closed decades ago, because these people had nowhere to go but on the street, and it made them worse. It made the streets worse. And isn't it more humane to open those hospitals and to help those people than to just let them roam free? Carrie in Franklin, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Carrie?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm good. My name is Carrie, and I'm calling about a situation in my family, and there was a solution there. She was my sister-in-law a long time ago. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She was 19, so therefore she was an adult, and she had rights. So she was on the street, and we couldn't get her off the street, and she was getting into trouble and getting hurt. So her parents went to court, and they were able to get legal guardianship. I don't know exactly how that works, but that's what they did. And they were able to, make her go to a place where she could be taken care of, because she wouldn't take her meds. And she didn't take her meds. She was kind of out of control. So they got her into a halfway house. And that was probably 20 years ago. She's still there, and she's doing great.
Oh.
And one of the stipulations was, you can stay here, but you have to take your meds. If you don't take your meds, you have to go somewhere else, and you may not like it there.
Okay.
So she made friends. She has a part-time job, and as long as she takes her meds, she's fine.
See,
that was the only way that they could do that.
Yeah, well, that's what those houses are for people like your sister-in-law. I mean, that's what it's for. It's not for the criminally insane. But the problem is when they closed the hospitals, there was nowhere else for those people to go, and so they got lumped in with people like your sister-in-law who could be helped. And these are people that, saying to them, take your meds or you have to move someplace else, means nothing. That doesn't help them. So that's a wonderful story. I'm so glad that happened. And see, it does. I think we really need, and I'm so grateful that her parents were able to get a guardianship and a guardian ad litem for her. But that's not usually what I hear. I hear that people weren't able to do that. So I think we need to find a way to talk to our legislators about putting something in place. This is Sandy Shack sitting in for Jeff Kuhner here on the Kuhner Report, and we're talking about President Trump's idea to reopen state mental hospitals to get the criminally insane off the streets. Is this a first necessary step to fixing our broken mental health system and cleaning up our streets all at the same time? On the text line, 978 says, Governor Dukakis closed all of the state mental hospitals in the 70s or so to get us where we are today on purpose. We have plans to open them up, get them back on track to become a productive member of society. Otherwise, they'll be institutionalized, unfortunately, but still taken care of. I agree. So I understand that that they weren't, paradise on earth here, but those people were taken care of. They had a roof over their head. They were fed. They were medicated. They got help. They were safe, relatively speaking. And none of that, all that went out the window when they were forced out onto the streets. Was there abuse? Yes. Do we need to put safeguards into place so that doesn't happen again? Yes. Are we better at that than we used to be? Absolutely. Are there better medications, better treatment now? Absolutely. Will this help the whole system by taking pressure off the interim level care units that cannot handle the criminally insane and allow them to focus on the people they can help? Yes, absolutely. I don't see a downside to reopening the state facilities. Do you? I guess that's my question for you. Let's go to Rick in Cambridge. Rick, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Good morning. Great topic. I commend you and your staff for somehow coming up with this topic. One of the things I heard a previous caller say was, forced medication. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, you can't help someone that doesn't want to help themselves. Mm-hmm. Alcohol, drugs, mental illness. Some people have all three. Now, being I hate to say it, as a veteran, I was, misdiagnosed, and I was, I've been through the mill myself, and it's so just,
sorry.
You get to hey, I'm a little better now. Don't count your eggs till they're hatched, but anyway, you go through life and you do all these things, but you got to look at some, in my opinion, the underlying causes, and I used to dread going to my VA doctor and say, can you tell me about your childhood and your father and your mother? I said, whoa. I said, they're not sitting here with you today. I am, and it brings up these memories of this and that, whatever may have happened. And there are multiple causes and different, everybody has a horror story. Not everybody, but, one differential is, it's compounded. If you're doing, if you got mental illness to begin with, and then you go seek help, and then they medicate you, mm-hmm. and and then you say, geez, the VA used to be notorious for dispensing certain pharmaceuticals and this and that. And I remember one time I went to the pharmacy and the guy gave me this and he gave me that, and I'd be coming outside the door at the VA and hey, what do you got? What do you got? What do you got? Mm-hmm. And I say, nothing. You let me out of here. But anyway, if somebody needs help, you can't help someone that doesn't want it. But maybe they get to the point in their life where they're not capable of making a decision like that. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think is important is the staff has to be trained to deal with, these. You're going to get people from all aspects of life. You're going to get this guy and that girl, and then when they wind up on the streets, they God forbid, you look at Mass and Cass, the horror show, and then these young ladies, God bless them if they can make it,
I know.
But, they hook up with these individuals, and they got one thing on their mind, what's in it for me, blah, 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 how can I make money, blah, blah, blah. And, one of the things, you remember years ago when the pharmaceutical companies were going to the doctors and offering them these huge benefits of, prescribe this drug, prescribe that drug, and it's just like, wow. And these are people, with education, and they're running this. And I think, what's the phrase in that movie? It's all about the Benjamins, mm-hmm. yeah? And once you go to a facility, if you don't have the proper health insurance, I worked for the city of Cambridge. I had the VA benefits. And everywhere, at some certain points, I struggled with alcoholism, and I still do, Mm-hmm. Every day is a battle, And that's you got to remember, the individual, and there's so many, as they call primary, secondary, underlying causes. Oh, my God. I could go on and on. But, the best thing to do is to have qualified people to deal with, like as you said earlier, I think about teaching the kids that are going to college. I think actually they have to, if they go into a medical profession, they have to take certain aspects. One of them is drinking, drugging, mental illness, and this and that, and depending on what field they go. But it's just it's kind of like I always have a good outlook and say, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
But I used to say, gee, I hope it's not the train
Another train
coming
at me. Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about in regard to the hospitals and a lot of things being dependent upon insurance, I think if you reopen the state hospitals, they're not as dependent upon insurance. So I think that would alleviate one of those problems. There's one thing that I kind of disagree with you on, and that was when you're talking about you can't force somebody to take meds. I agree you can't force somebody to take meds in the long term, but the medication thing is a catch-22 situation. If you don't take it, you won't be well enough to know that you need to take it. So it's an unpleasant kind of thing that falls back in on itself. I think if you can get them to take the meds initially, and maybe so the first time or two they take the meds, it's not voluntary, but maybe that helps them enough so that they can they can now discern that it's in their best interest and then start voluntarily taking it, or get them to the point where they understand the incentive behind taking it. Like the caller who was talking about, her sister-in-law, they told her, basically, if you don't take your meds, you can't stay here, and here's a pretty nice place to stay. That was an incentive, and she was in a place where she could weigh the options and understand that it was in her best interest. And I think maybe I agree with you for long term. You can't make somebody take their meds if they don't want to be there, but I think you can initially. And so I don't know if you agree with that or not, Rick.
Agree to a certain extent, but the individual, if they have enough marbles to make the decision, I don't mean to put it that way.
No, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Life is too short. Life is too precious. I have a big problem just getting into an appointment with Social Security, and when I finally get in there one day, I looked around, and between the people with mental illness and the people who couldn't speak English, that's for another day, but it's like I just walked out, and it's just a situation where, better days are coming. You ever have to have a good outlook, and the support and the help is there if you have the mental capabilities to make that decision, because someday there'll become a point where you are not capable of making that decision, and you have to be put in a locked ward, which happened to happen to me. And I said to myself, you got to be kidding me. Here I am. I got an honorable discharge. I fought for my country. And I heard it, many, many years ago, freedom ain't free. And I used to sit and I got committed by a judge. I went to some program called Spectrum, this and that. And I said, holy cow, what did I do wrong? And now I'll tell you, just on my personal note, I know it sounds crazy because marijuana is legal now, but that's the gateway, the key, in my opinion. Many people don't agree, but, it starts with that, and then you try this, and then you try this.
You're talking about addiction.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll let you go. I know you got a lot of callers, and good subject, and you got a great staff.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate your call, and I'm so you sound like you're doing pretty well now, so I'm very happy for you that it all turned out all right. And it sounds like even though it was a an arduous and probably frightening proposition, being committed seems to have put you on a track to success eventually, and because that's where it sounds like you are right now. So thank you so much for the call. And I think more people deserve that opportunity to get the help that they need and possibly get back on the road to being productive members of society, to being able to live their own lives in peace and with the people around them, like Rick is, like our earlier caller's sister-in-law was at the halfway house where she's been for 20 years. And I think the first step to that is reopening the state mental hospitals to get people help who may not recognize that they need it themselves, and to take the pressure off the less severe programs that are helping, or the programs that are helping people with a less severe issue, because right now they're overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed with people who should not be there, who maybe would be better off in the state mental facilities. So I know it has stigma attached to it, and I know it has stigma in regard to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and a place of abuse, but it doesn't have to be that. Haven't we learned enough? Haven't we evolved enough to make them better places this time around? I think President Trump is on the right track with this idea. Do you? The number is 617-266-6868. We're talking about reopening state mental hospitals because President Trump gave a print interview to the Daily Caller during which he said we need to open up our asylums again to get the criminally insane off the street. This is all part of his broader approach to combating crime. And you can't argue with his success in D.C. implementing his policies regarding fighting crime. And I'm wondering, is this also a successful policy? Do you think that this would serve its purpose and help the criminally insane, as well as alleviate stress and pressure on interim programs before you get to the state institutional level? The text number is 70470-207 says, Sandy, Massachusetts is doing the same thing to the intellectually disabled community, closing the long-term residential treatment facilities. The problem of homelessness is going to get a lot worse. Also, the community halfway houses are likely facing another issue those with intellectual disability face. The workers are not well trained, and they are usually illegal immigrants or those with temporary protected status. These homes in the community get no state oversight. The Boston Globe has written about the abuse faced by the disabled clients in these homes. I'm sure it happens to the mentally ill as well. They would all be safer and receive proper treatment in institutional settings. I have firsthand knowledge of what you're talking about in regard to the disabled community, and I completely agree with your assessment of what's happening there. But the problem with the disabled community is the same as with the mentally ill community, and that is you have different gradations going on here. One of which is, you have people who are so profoundly disabled that they really can't take care of themselves and do benefit from an institutional environment. And you have people who are less disabled or less profoundly disabled and can function outside with a little assist. And so, again, I think if you have institutionalized accommodations available, that you take the pressure off those houses that are not equipped to deal with the more profoundly disabled or the more profoundly mentally ill, and therefore they can hire more better trained people. They can focus more on those clients that can really benefit from being in that environment instead of those that are just being warehoused in that environment. I think it's a win-win for everybody. Do you agree? Let's go to Heather in Maine. Heather, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Heather?
Good morning, Sandy. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine. So do you think this is a good idea to reopen the mental hospitals?
I do think on different levels. First off, I wish Jeff my best. So growing up in the 80s, my mother worked at Hogan Regional when Danvers State Hospital was closing, thank God, because she used to tell me about the people there being chained, having lobotomies.
Oh, God.
Just crazy stuff happening. So she worked at the greenhouse with the clients, and they would grow vegetables and flowers and sell them. And so I really appreciate the earlier caller talking about the farms, and we all need a purpose in life. And I think that's like, as much as we can, I think that's what we should aim to do with any level of intellectual or mental disability. So my son works at one of the intellectually disabled homes on the North Shore. Mm-hmm. He's been doing it for a long time. I think it's a great place for the people that he is taking care of. But I too have run into things with another family member where if you try to get insurance coverage for mental health stuff, the insurance company will deny it. So unless you are well off, that person's going to fall through the cracks. And I think that's where you see the people that are addicted to drugs and are homeless. So I think personally the villain in this entire story is the insurance companies. Mm-hmm. When you have a psychiatrist recommending, a treatment for somebody that they know well, but then the insurance company has their psychiatrist who they pay to deny these people coverage. It is absolutely criminal. Yeah. That's why they have the biggest buildings in the world. They are corrupt. And I would say that's where Trump needs to start.
Well, I don't necessarily mean start, but I think he needs to pay attention to it. I agree with you. I think also that sounds like a something for Congress to get involved in regard to passing legislation, maybe setting up a board that only has maybe maybe insurance people have to bring in a doctor, maybe their opinion of their doctor only gets weighed 30% as opposed to the primary care physician, which gets weighed, 70%. I mean, there are all sorts of ways you can do that, but we need legislation to make that legal. So I agree with you that's one of the top places that we need to focus our efforts on. But don't you think opening the state asylums would also help? Because if it's a state asylum, insurance is not going to be the issue. That they don't rely upon insurance the same way private houses do or private facilities do.
Yeah, I do not like the name asylum. I think it's got negative connotation. It's really outdated in my opinion. I like that earlier caller that said it should be a wellness center.
Yeah, mental wellness center I like very much. That's one of my top
I think that's
names.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it should be tiered based on ability and based on disability.
I agree.
And, same thing with like the work programs. Those should all be tiered and that should all be teased out. But that's going to take a lot of people and a lot of money to do that. But I do think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
I agree with you. And I think one of the questions here is fixing the mental health system worth our time, effort, and tax money, treasure? And for me, the answer is a big, absolutely thumbs up. I would rather see our money being spent on this, our time and effort and energy being spent on this, than on detention centers for illegal immigrants that shouldn't be here. I mean, let's finish what President Trump started and then close those down. We don't need to be supporting those. We don't need to be sending cell phones and hotel rooms or allowing illegal aliens to have hotel rooms and free cell phones and free clothes and free food. None of that. That can all be spent on doing these mental wellness centers as well as various other programs, along with, I love the idea from the earlier caller about USAID. All billions of dollars went through USAID to help people in other countries. Why can't that money, which exists, be funneled back into the mental health system here? So, I mean, I think that there are a lot of things that tax money is wasted on, and a lot of things don't need the support of the federal government. But I think this is one of those things that does. And if we put our mind to it, much like we put our mind to the space program in the 60s, that was a national effort. If we make a national effort in regard to mental wellness, I think we could do something amazing that benefits everybody. It benefits the people who are criminally insane, who, to be honest with you, there probably is no hope for, but they will be taken care of and they will be in a safe place and be provided for. It will help the people who are not criminally insane that still have the ability to maybe get better and function on a level that is maybe beyond where they are right now. That it takes the pressure off of that. It takes the pressure off the halfway houses where people who can really function every day in life with just a little bit of assistance. It takes the pressure off of people walking down the street who are afraid they're going to be assaulted. There's nobody who does not benefit from this. Do you think I'm painting too rosy a picture, Heather?
Totally agree with you. It all starts with mental health. I think your physical health starts with your mental health. So, all of us could benefit from more mental health and more yoga and more, just taking care of our souls. And I think it absolutely would help society to bring all of these people up. And I think that is a great policy. I trust Trump, and I do think it's a great idea.
Me too, Heather. Absolutely, positively. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it very much. I think that President Trump meant to start the conversation. He obviously did. It was on his platform when he ran for president, and he's been to bring back the insane asylums. And I know that's a pejorative term, Heather. I know for everybody, but that's the term that President Trump used. And so that's why I'm using it. Even though I actually agree with you, it's pejorative. You want to take the stigma out of it. So let's call them something else. Fine. I have no problem. A rose by any other name. Call it whatever you want to call, whatever you think is going to make it more publicly palatable. I think that's fine. But I think he meant to start this conversation regarding what do we need to do. And it is not a little problem. It's not a problem where, your local councilman can just sign something into being and fix everything. This is a huge problem that affects all of us. Whether you have somebody who's been through the mental health system or not, it affects you because you can't walk down the street. It's because, you're affected by people who have no place to go, homeless, as much as anybody else. And it's heartbreaking to see a lot of these people. And we can fix this if we put our mind to it. And I think that President Trump tosses things out there to start discussions, to start people thinking about what they can do to help. And in this particular case, I think when he says, let's open the insane asylums because we can't have crazy people walking around, that's the Donald Trump way of saying we need to focus our attention on the mental health system. And in my view, reopening the state hospitals, which were closed in the 70s and 80s, is a first step toward focusing our attention on fixing the whole system. One step at a time, but you start with there, and then you do the legislation that you need to support it, and then if we all focus on it, don't you think we could get it done? Tommy in West Virginia, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Tommy?
I'm very well this morning. I grew up in Foxborough, and I do remember in the mid-'70s, Dukakis closing down the Foxborough State Hospital. And that was on the corner of Payson Road and Chestnut Street. And there used to be, what my grandfather told me, a farm on the corner of Chestnut Street and Baker Street, big open field. And they had mentally ill patients that were capable of working a garden, doing that during the summer months. And I also worked at the Lafayette House during my high school years as a dishwasher. I wasn't one of those white kids that was fortunate enough to have so-called white privilege. I had to work washing dishes, making minimum wage back then, like many kids I grew up with. And there were men that were mentally ill, that were capable of showing up to work every day, doing kitchen-type help. And I never felt threatened being around them or any stigma. And they were just guys that, for whatever reason, life had not been kind to them as far as mentally developing. But in my observation back then, it gave these men a sense of purpose. And some geniuses at Boston University had to make a movie called Titicut Follies back in the 60s, of where this was filmed in the town of Bridgewater with the mentally insane back then. And it started this reformer movement of well-intended, highly educated white liberals who just know everything. And then it was probably when I started living in Boston around 1978, that fall, that I started seeing really odd people living on the streets of Boston, going to the bathroom. There was one guy we used to call Mayor White because he was bald and he combed his hair over like the mayor at that time, that I remember him using the corner of Mass Ave and Newbury Street as a men's room, so to speak. And that I started seeing more and more of that. And those were the people that highly educated white liberals back then thought, oh, we can just put them in halfway houses and they won't be cooped up like prisoners. Well, that's when we started hearing the term in the language of lexicon, homelessness. It was another Noam Chomsky-esque type term back then of people who couldn't afford a house. Well, when I grew up, I never witnessed anyone in Foxborough, Massachusetts, or Mansfield, the surrounding town, that was homeless. There are now homeless people living in those towns. Not a whole lot, but I certainly see it at Mass in Cass and other parts of Boston. And at some point, progressive thought has to realize that, some of the things that we thought were well-intended just backfired. There were unintended consequences. And Trump is right. We need to reopen mental institutions. And there are some people that, I live in Brockton, and Brockton is about to elect their first Cape Verdean mayor. He's a very good guy. And I had a conversation with him, and he said what he's going to do with the homeless in Brockton, there's many people there that are mentally ill, and there are some people there that are addicted to drugs. But he's going to give them two choices. You either go into the shelters and get help, or we're going to arrest you. And I said, you realize the ACLU is going to pay you a visit. And he said, I don't care about the ACLU. He said, I care about getting Brockton back to where it once was, which was a business hub, a business center. And I totally agree with him.
Well, that's President Trump's policy, Tommy, for the homeless in Washington, D.C. That's what they've been doing. Either we can put you in a shelter or we can put you in jail. And that's what they've been doing in D.C. for the past few weeks.
Here. Like I say, there's some people that really do. I don't know the legalities of it, but there are some people that at some point a judge has to realize, something, this person is incapable of taking care of themselves. And for the greater good of this country, we need to start putting people like that away in institutions. And it's warehousing people is basically what it comes down to. But at some point, you just can't have some person that's schizophrenic that decides to go and push a little old lady in front of a subway train at the last minute. That's not helping out the rest of society. And like I said, I hope Bill from Sudbury will call in and tell me where I am incorrect on my point of view on this. And I hope some other fool up there in the North Shore calls up and said, well, that guy from West Virginia and who grew up in Foxborough is just obviously a mean-spirited person. And like I said, I remember growing up as a kid not seeing homeless people living on the streets. And that included Boston back then. You could go to downtown Crossing and you would not see bums sleeping on the streets or heroin addicts sleeping on the streets of downtown Crossing. Now it's everywhere. And at some point we have to clean this up.
Well, Tommy,
anyway,
I don't think you're mean-spirited at all. So, and I understand there has to be a way of helping everybody, and I don't think it's mean-spirited to say go to jail or go to the shelter, because you're basically doing the same thing that halfway house was doing to that earlier caller's sister-in-law, saying you can take your meds and you can live here, or you can not take your meds and not live here. That's basically the same option that gives the homeless people who have a myriad of problems as to why they're homeless. I mean, it could be addiction, it could be mental illness, it could be both. It could be just down on your luck circumstances. Either way, no matter what the issue is, there is more help and there's more salvation at the shelter. And that's all it's meant to do. It's not meant to be mean to the homeless. It's meant to say, we can help you, but you got to help us first and come this way, and we'll do what we can to help you. And I think that's the first step. They have to want to be helped, and that's how you decide somebody wants to be helped. Now, I can't imagine people would rather pick jail, but maybe they will, in which case they're still off the street and they're in government housing. And from there, maybe you got to figure out what the right transition is to get them out of there and into a place where they can be helped either through hospitalization or a rehabilitation. I'm not sure what the answer is, and it's got to be a very idiosyncratic process for that particular person. But I don't think it's mean-spirited to put that there. I think the whole part of this is to make people aware of what programs are available. And I think a really big part of what the president is planning on doing is reopening these hospitals. I don't view it as warehousing people. I view it as protecting people who can't protect themselves and who may be dangerous to themselves or, dangerous to other people. The street is no place for them. First of all, the animal instincts come out in regard to survival. And if they have no judgment to begin with due to mental illness, that's when they hurt themselves and other people, and crime starts to have no meaning for them because all they're thinking about is survival. And that's why you have these horrific crime statistics in a lot of cities where people are just trying to survive and don't know how to do it elsewhere because they don't have the wherewithal to figure out that they need help. And that's what the hospitals will do. I know on the face of it, it sounds like putting people in hospitals is a drastic, mean thing to do. And Tommy just pointed that out. And thank you for the call, Tommy. But I think it's kind of like, people are going to laugh at me for using this, but it's kind of like tough love, essentially. It's knowing that these people will have a better existence in a hospital situation. And gone are the days of chaining people up and having lobotomies and one flew over the cuckoo's nest. That was what it was at one point in time. It isn't what it is anymore. Mental Wellness Center. Put the name of your state before that. So Massachusetts Wellness Center or Florida Wellness Center or Kentucky Wellness Center. Does this sound like a good idea to you? This is Sandy Shack sitting in for Jeff Kuhner here on the Kuhner Report. President Trump wants to reopen state mental hospitals. Maybe changing the name will make that sound a little less draconian to help the criminally insane and make our streets safer at the same time. Is this a good idea? Sandy from Swampscott, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Sandy?
Hear your voice. I've loved listening to you for years when you were on the radio on a constant basis, and I miss you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I like the name that you were just speaking of. I totally agree with you. It needs a different branding. I hate the stigma because it's just one big broad strip of someone who really has been stolen because of their illness from daily life. And what is your opinion of a compassion center?
Oh, I like Compassion Center. That's nice. Although I think that it's maybe a little too broad-based. Maybe, how about Mental Wellness and Compassion Center?
I think any time that we address because of the years of mental illness, mental, I think the term mental, even though it identifies that it comes from the head, I think it has a bad, they're mentally ill, they're funny, they're weird, whatever. But I think it's inviting people into being compassionate for the suffering. Mm-hmm. Also, people who go there, as was mentioned earlier, their heart is broken to see one of their loved ones going through what they're going through and feeling very helpless that they're not able to help them as they'd love to. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a lot of compassion from both sides because they are suffering.
Okay, how about Wellness and Compassion Center?
That's even better.
There you go.
Yeah, that's even better because how can you be snarky when they come out and, say, I know you love that word, yeah, right. Yeah, because compassion is from the heart.
Yeah, I agree.
And like you said, so what did you say again? Say it again.
Wellness and Compassion Center.
Yes. Yes, and another point you brought out I thought was very interesting. Are you going to be able to carry these names on to Trump in some way?
Yeah, sure. You bet.
Good, because I think asylum, and you know the way he talks, bless his heart, he just can't help himself.
No.
The whole asylum it just really has a horrible sound, and it had a really bad reputation in so many ways back then. I would love to see that buried.
Well, I don't disagree with that. Asylum, to be honest with you, kind of evokes like 1800s to me. It's an asylum, from actually, what it makes me think of is Dracula and Renfrew and taking over the insane asylum and eating bugs. That's what I think of when I hear the term asylum is Count Dracula and friends. So, I completely get the asylum, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, same thing, same kind of bad connotations when I hear the word asylum. But President Trump, and he's a straight shooter, and he sometimes lacks tact, but I don't think that makes his intent any less pure. And I think in this particular case, he's looking at a broad picture of fighting crime, one, which is on his front burner right now, as well as compassion for the criminally insane, because what kind of life is it to be crazy and on the streets, and so that you are hurting yourself and other people? I can't imagine that no matter how far gone you are, if you have a choice, that you want to do that. But a lot of these people don't have a choice, and that's why President Trump thinks it's I think that's why he started the conversation, and I think we can certainly respond to that. And we may not be able to achieve all the things that we've talked about today, but we can certainly achieve a number of them. And I think the first step is reopening the hospitals and putting into place, the oversight that we need in order to make them a safe place for people to be, and then work on the legislative issues that we need in regard to insurance and in regard to people being committed to them without their permission. I think you need to find a due process way to do that, and then that will start trickling down and taking care of, not to steal a phrase from President Biden, who liked to badmouth trickle down theory, but I think once you alleviate that stress of the criminally insane and the people who are really profoundly disturbed from the mid-level and lower-level programs, I think they'll start to straighten themselves out a little bit. Don't you think, Sandy?
Well, I see it more as there's a lot of eyes in those hospitals where they can look at them without people who have been terribly exposed, not only to the weather, but to a lot of cruelty and unsanitary situations that's been happening when they let go. Closing them down was cruel. John F. Kennedy, with his compassion with his sister, was the one who really opened a door in a positive way. And then, unfortunately, practically a decade later, they were almost closing all of them. So,
well, the Kennedy family has still been very involved in issues regarding the disabled. And it's to this day. And so they're, besides running the Special Olympics, but they're also involved in the day-to-day issues regarding some of the independent living systems that are in Massachusetts. I can't speak for other states, but I know those in Massachusetts. That legacy lives on. Thank you for the call, Sandy. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, I know people say it's just a name, who cares, but I think Sandy's right. You need a positive name. You need to put a positive spin on things, and you need to put resources behind opening state hospitals, so they're not prisons and they're not the asylums of the 1800s, that there's some place where people can go to be safe. In his jihad against crime, President Trump has suggested that one of the things that would help would be reopening the insane asylums. Those are his words, because you don't want crazy people walking around. Do you agree with that? I think that what he did by tossing that out there was open the discussion on mental health and how it needs to be fixed, because it affects not just the people who are, in his term, crazy. It affects everybody, because if those people are left out on the streets, they create dangerous situations, not just for themselves, but for everybody. And that's one of the reasons why President Trump wants to reopen the state mental hospitals. I see it even further. To open the state mental hospitals, one, corrects a wrong that was done in the 70s and 80s, because they shouldn't have been closed to begin with. And an earlier caller, I think, put their finger right on it. You had well-meaning people who really didn't know what they were doing, who thought that they were doing something positive for people by getting rid of these centers that had become known for abuse. But in actuality, what they did was turn the denizens of the asylums into homeless people. They just tossed them out onto the street and let them fend for themselves. There was nothing in place to help these people. And so, a lot of them ended up dying on the street and taking other people with them. So it was just a whole raft of unintended consequences that were dire. And I think that by bringing those hospitals back in a different, more modern way, where there's a lot more supervision and a lot more humane treatment, I think that takes pressure off the rest of the system and enables the rest of the system to operate as it should and not be clogged up with people who are too profoundly disturbed to really take advantage of the middle to lower level systems. And the people who could take advantage of them can't because the resources are too badly stretched. And so I think it's a win-win for everybody. But he's getting a lot of criticism regarding opening the state hospitals because the people who closed them to begin with now have to look at their failed experiment and take ownership of it. And they don't want to do that. And they certainly don't want President Trump to be the person to salvage the situation. So I think that is why people are putting roadblocks up against what should be a win-win for everybody. I think it's a fantastic idea. What do you think? Bob in Raynham, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Bob?
Good. How are you, Sandy?
I'm doing fine. Do you think this is a good idea to reopen the state mental hospitals?
I do, but I can already hear the lefties saying, oh, my God, this is what Hitler did. He rounded up the mentally ill. So I think instead of going at it at a state level, I think President Trump should begin at the federal level with the VA hospital and the homeless and or mentally ill vets. And I'm speaking from experience here. Unfortunately, my dad was mentally ill, and he was in the VA system back in the 60s when they did do shock treatment. They did do.
It was one flew over the cuckoo's nest in the 60s.
Yeah, it pretty much was.
Yeah.
But fast forward to the 80s, and unfortunately, my brother was involved in the VA system. And although it's not at that level, it really isn't much better. And, everybody comes out and says, oh, we love our vets. Thanks for your service, blah, 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 blah. But and I've heard good things about the VA regarding, like, if you're a cognizant vet and, you need knee surgery or whatever, I guess that type of care is top notch. But as far in both of my experiences, them dealing with mental illness is a disgrace. And President Trump should start with that, which is something he has control of. I know he put Scott Brown in charge his first term. I don't know who's in charge now, but
no, Scott Brown was not in charge his first term. Scott Brown was ambassador to New Zealand in his first term.
Oh, okay. I thought he was put. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think he was one of the finalists for secretary of the Veterans Administration.
Oh, okay.
But he was the ambassador to New Zealand. He was not, had nothing to do with the VA.
Sorry, but yeah, I mean, I think President Trump, instead of fighting all these crazy lefties that, as you say, they won't give him credit for anything. No. I mean, just look at what happened in his first term when he brought the hospital ships up to New York, and they wouldn't put one patient on there. Instead, they would have rather them, which they did, put them back in the nursing homes and allow them to die.
Yeah.
So I think again, he has control over the federal issue, so he should begin there because he's just going to get fought tooth and nail by the states, I believe.
Well, can he do both at the same time? I mean, he is bringing reform to the VA system, and I agree that a focus on mental health is required, and absolutely he needs to put attention there. But Is there any reason why they can't do both? Because he can't order the states to open their mental asylums. What he can do is make it appealing to the states to do it by offering federal funding, by offering federal resources to make them want to do it. That's how he has to do that. He can't make them. So I think, but he can make the VA do stuff. So I think he could do both of those things. Don't you think, Bob? He can focus federal resources on beefing up the mental health facilities at the VA, while at the same time the Congress can make it appealing for state hospitals to reopen. I think they can both be done at the same time. I think they can multitask that, don't you?
Well, you would think so, and you would hope so, because as you say, and I agree with you, that, getting these people off the streets is a benefit to all of us, them, us, and really everyone involved, society.
Yeah. I don't see any downside for anybody. So thank you so much for the call, Bob, and I hope your family is doing well. Let's go to Priscilla in Florida. Priscilla, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Priscilla? Is Priscilla there? I don't think so. I think Priscilla may have a phone problem. Okay, let's go to Jay on the South Shore. Jay, welcome to WRKO.
Hey, Sandy, great job. What a beautiful day today. Part of the problem is they just keep enabling these kids and adults to continue with their drug addiction. Like, everybody has a family member that got hooked up on the pills or the heroin or whatever, and there's no incentive to ever make them better. They just keep prolonging it with methadone and all that. But I think one approach Trump should take is he should put together a little task force and go out, have it all filmed, go to these places and ask people who wants help today. Start there. Who wants help today? And I guarantee you, half of those people don't want to be there. They're trapped. They're looking for a way out. And he could televise and show, we're here to help. We're not here to lock anybody up. But let's start with those who want the help. Whoever wants the help, come here, step forward, we'll help you. And instead of sugarcoating the name and call it, rockabye baby rehab, let's call it what...
Yes, go ahead.
Let's call it what it really is, the last resort. Because for many of these folks, it is the last resort, because to maintain that lifestyle, I know, it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with going out and saying, hey, you had a tough go at it. Would you like some help? We're here to help. And if even you can pull 4 or 5 people out of 1,000, it's a place to start.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that?
I think that's not a bad idea at all, Jay. I think first of all, you can't help somebody until they want to be helped. But I think what in regard to, but I think what you're talking about there is mid-level. These are not the people that would go into a state mental hospital to begin with. I think these are mid-level programs that serve a vital function, and we need to preserve and protect. But what President Trump, I believe, is talking about is clearing out people who are currently either a danger to themselves or to others that are on the street, and also clearing them out of these mid-level programs because they really cannot be helped at this point in time. What you're trying to do now is protect them from themselves and protect others from them. You're not talking about people who are going to volunteer for help and try to better themselves. These are people who are just trying to survive. That I think there's a big difference, and I think that's what he's trying to focus on first, because it also helps with the crime issue. This is the Kuhner Report. I am Sandy Shack, sitting in for Jeff Kuhner, and the question we've asked is, should the state medical hospitals be reopened? Because President Trump says yes. What do you say? Let's go to Brian in Tewksbury. Brian, welcome to WRKO.
Great topic. Listen, let me preface this by saying you're talking to a guy that disagrees with Donald Trump on almost everything, but he is spot on this. And I think it was Tommy that called a little earlier. He gave a lot of the good history. I just wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit. 15 years ago in Massachusetts, we had as much as 1,600 state-operated inpatient beds. for mental health. We're down to under 600.
Oh, wow.
What's rooted in is something called the Olmsted decision. It was a court case, a federal court case, that said wherever possible, states should strive to deliver care in the community. It was called the Community First Initiative. And as Tommy said, it was well-intentioned. But what has happened over time is Community First has essentially become community only. And there are no more inpatient beds in the state. And that's why you've got people boarded in emergency rooms, in prisons, and that's why you've got people walking around the streets, homeless, because there is no place for them to go. Even further compounding the problem is the state has basically handed off all of this care to so-called private nonprofits to deliver the care. Yeah. And if you look at these nonprofits, the state literally contracts with hundreds of them. And each one of them has their own highly compensated team of executives. And we know this because their tax loans, their 990s, are available online through a website called GuideStar. And I'm talking people, there are people who are getting really, really rich off this stuff. People making high million-dollar salaries to run these so-called nonprofits. They pay their staff nothing. A lot of the staff are on public assistance, so they're not adequately staffed in the community. And, you know, you've been kicking around a lot of great names. There is actually a shining example in Massachusetts that's still left. It's called the Worcester Recovery Center.
Okay.
And it was built under Mitt Romney, actually. It's a brand new, it's not brand new anymore, but they actually, within the Department of Mental Health, the nickname for it is the Courtyard at DMH.
Okay.
It is absolutely beautiful. And it has beauty parlors in there, for example, you know, for patients to go down
and feel good about themselves. And
get makeovers. I mean, and that's just in absolutely beautiful facilities, beautiful grounds. But it's essentially, other than the hospital in Taunton, which Deval Patrick tried to close repeatedly, and it's really the only place for state-operated inpatient beds. And what Donald Trump could do, these are all funded through federal funds. What he could do is they could stipulate that this federal money be only used for state-operated care. And that would get rid of a lot of these nonprofit vendors that are sucking hundreds of millions of dollars in executive pay alone out of the system and bring up this stock, because these facilities, they're not just for people that need to spend years there, right? There are some people that go out into the community care and they do very, very well, but then they have a relapse for whatever reason. And they need what they call respite care, where they have to go in maybe for 30 or 60 days, but there's no place for them to go. And that's why they end up sitting in the hallways of an emergency room.
I think that is a great idea, stipulating for the state care. I am very familiar with the nonprofits that you're talking about. I've dealt firsthand with a number of them. So it's on behalf of a family member. So I do understand exactly what you're talking about. And you've made me want to go to the GuideStar and start making a list of salaries to use, you know, the next time we have a conversation with why, you know, the staff members are not of the correct experience level that they should be in some of these homes. I think you've given the Trump administration some very good advice, Brian, as to how to move forward, not just in Massachusetts, but I think in other places as well. Who knew? I did not know about the Worcester Recovery Center. I think that is a place absolutely worth exploring. Thank you so much for the information, Brian, and for the call. Let's go to Judy in Maine. Judy, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
You to know that I'm calling on behalf of medical professionals like myself who have worked in healthcare with these type of situations. And how can I put this? I think any legislation or any decision, I have seen so many co-workers get injured by mentally ill patients.
Yeah.
And we can see what's happening, like the guy said, pushing a little old lady off a subway platform. The community is getting hurt in general, but a lot of medical professionals get hurt by these patients.
Yeah, because you're on the front lines.
Well, it's no wonder people don't want to work in the industry. Yeah. I got out of it for that reason. I saw a nurse get beat up by a mentally ill patient, and she ended up in the hospital for months.
Wow.
Could never work again. And the poor girl was trying to pay off loans she went to nursing school, and she had to pay off loans because she wanted to do good for them. Anyway, I think every decision that is made has to be made not necessarily patient-centric, the general population-centric. We are so focused. I mean, I'm a compassionate person. As a matter of fact, I had mental illness in my family. My mother almost killed my father. I won't go into detail, but she almost killed him because of her mental illness.
Judy, I need to stop you there because we're out of time, but I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you also have to take into not just the patients, but the community at large and the medical community that takes care of these people. I think that's what Donald Trump had in mind when he's talking about reopening the state mental hospitals, because he's talking about removing people such as the person who hurt your friend, your fellow coworker there, putting them in a place that's more suited for the illness or for the disturbance that they have.